Saturday, October 27th, 2018, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning I want to talk about Argentina and how they keep doing the same thing over and over again, making the same mistake as it regards to the IMF. Before that, I want to just go over what the markets did yesterday very briefly and look at how the stock market, the precious metals, have done so far this year and also in the last month. Yesterday, of course, gold actually broke out from a key resistance at 1240 during the day. It spiked higher to 1244. Unfortunately, the powers that be came in and stuffed it back down. But I still think it looks quite positive. I won't look at the technicals today. But so let's start with what the markets did yesterday. The stock markets technical picture doesn't look great. You can look at my previous videos in the last week or so to see that. So the Dow yesterday finished down 296 points or 1.19%. So it's down almost 7% for the month of October. S&P index finished down 47 or down 1.73%. It's down almost 9% for the month or 8.76%. And the NASDAQ composite finished down 151 or 2.2%. And that's down 11% on the month. So not great month for the stock market so far. So let's have a look at how we're doing year to date and for the last year, so to speak. Here we have the Dow, and this is from Bloomberg. So year to date, now the Dow is down 0.13%. So the 1 year return is 7.73%. So we're just, so the stock market is down for the year, the Dow, just barely there. S&P, we're down 0.5% year to date and 5% on the year. And the NASDAQ composite, that's still up on the year, 3.82%, and still up 8.1% for 1 year. So what about gold and silver? Well, gold yesterday closed at 1233.53. As I said, we broke through 1240. You can see that spike there during the day, and then they just came in and smashed it down as to keep it under control. Year to date, it's down 5.3%. But of course, it's rebounded. It's up from a low of 1160 on the 15th of August. And I still think the technical picture is looking good. The weekly chart is looking very good as well. Silver is still lagging behind. Year to date, believe it or not, it's still down 13%, which shows that it's undervalued. Am I saying you should sell all your gold and buy silver? No, it's up to you really. But there you go, silver down 13% year to date. What about gold in British pounds? We've had a very, very good rally in the last month or so from just around 900, and we closed yesterday at 960.76 according to Bloomberg here. We did almost get up to 970. Again, they've managed the price late yesterday. But year to date is down 0.72%. If you think the Maneco 64 channel adds value to you and you'd like to contribute or help the channel, check the links below in the description. So Argentina, there's a saying from the Forrest Gump movie, stupid is as stupid does. And according to the Urban Dictionary, it means that an intelligent person who does stupid things is still stupid. You are what you do. So I would say Argentina, stupid is as stupid does. So let's play that little clip from the movie when Jenny asks, if Forrest is stupid.
Are you stupid or something?
Mama says stupid is as stupid does.
Jenny.
I'm Forrest Gump.
So I guess you can picture Argentina meeting the IMF and they ask, "Are you stupid or something?" And Argentina says, "Mama says stupid is as stupid does." So why is Argentina that stupid? Well, let's have a look at Argentina. First of all, the economic history of Argentina. Argentina is, looking here at Wikipedia, it says the economic history of Argentina is one of the most studied, owing to the Argentine paradox. Its unique condition as a country that had achieved advanced development early in the 20th century, but experienced a reversal, which inspired an enormous wealth of literature and diverse analysis of the causes of this decline. So another interesting tidbit about Argentina from wallstreetoasis.com, an article talking about in 2012, and it says, "As rich as an Argentine." So what's that all about? Well, I'll read a little bit about that. It says, in the early part of the 20th century, Argentina was among the top 10 richest countries in the world, maintaining this position into the 1950s. Between the 1890s and 1930s, Buenos Aires was totally overhauled, changed from a pretty Spanish colonial town to what it is today, a huge city with sprawling boulevards, French and Italian architecture, hundreds of parks and plazas, and three-line streets. So this is the interesting part here. It says, during this time, the very rich traveled to Europe, especially to Paris, where they painted the town red with their parties, their music, and their beautiful women. It was the French, seeing how lavishly the Argentines spent money, who coined the phrase riche comme un Argentin, or rich as an Argentine. So I'm not making this up, right? So Argentina was a rich country until the 1950s. So why am I talking about Argentina now? Well, I'll show you why. This article just came out on October 25th. This is from telesurtv.net, and it says, Argentina approves heavily protested austerity budget after 800 million treasury bill sale. The article goes on to say, Argentines clashed with security while demonstrating against the government's plans, tax increases and spending cuts. Early Thursday, Argentina's lower house approved the heavily protested austerity budget, which was designed to meeting a 57 billion International Monetary Fund, or IMF, bailout requirement. So IMF is coming into Argentina for a bailout requirement, right? So, and then I found an article from a website. It's from Argentina, this website, called www.thebubble.com. And it says, No Love Lost, a brief history of Argentina and the IMF. So this is written, let's see, give the guy credit. Nicholas Phillips wrote this. So, and I'll read from it. It says, last week, negotiations, and this was from May 2018, so it's quite recent. Last week, negotiations continued in Washington toward an IMF standby arrangement, or SBA, for Argentina. The negotiations with the IMF have dealt another blow to the government's popularity, which has reached new lows in recent months. On Friday, thousands took to the streets to reject a potential agreement with the IMF and the model of political and economic dependence. So, and it goes on to say, the checkered history of IMF interventions in Argentina serves to explain the current discontent. Many believe that the IMF's policy have primarily served the interests of foreign creditors by enabling the country to take on unsustainable external debt loads and enforcing domestic spending cuts. Economic historian Noemi Brenta said that the fund has, and I quote, a very explicit co-responsibility for its role in Argentina's economic crises. The interesting thing from this is what he says next. because we heard that Argentina was one of the richest countries in the world until the 1950s. I remember when I was young, growing up in Brazil, late 60s, early 70s, Argentinians still had relatively, they're still relatively wealthy. They used to be big tourists in Brazil. Now, I guess you probably don't see that many of them in Brazil anymore. So it says here, since becoming a member of the IMF in 1956. Well, look at that. It was the one of the richest countries in the world until the 1950s, right? And then it became a member of the IMF. And it says Argentina has turned to the fund for SBAs, which is the help from the IMF, on 18 occasions. Other conditioned loan packages in 3 instances, and non-restricted funding for 8 times. Of the 50 years between 1956 and 2006, the country was under an IMF program for 38 of those years. That tells you something, doesn't it? That tells you something about dealing with the IMF and what the IMF and the Washington consensus, and that's what it's called, has done to the emerging market countries, especially in Latin America. So what's happened now to Argentina recently? So at the end of the article, this guy, Mr. Phillips, says when Macri, who's the current president, was elected in 2015, he promised to reinsert Argentina into global markets. His first moves included paying off the vulture funds and inviting the IMF back to audit Argentina's finance. The government has returned to the international credit markets to finance the fiscal deficit and rejoined the IMF as a member. So why does Argentina need to borrow from abroad to actually have a functioning economy? Well, it doesn't. And I'll talk about that now a little bit, because I've been reading some of a material by Professor Richard Werner from the University of Southampton. He's an economist there, and he, in one of his essays, which I'll put a link below in the description, it's about, it says, shifting from central planning to a decentralized economy, do we need central banks? And in this essay or article, this is what he says here on part 4. We do not need to save or borrow from abroad in order to expand investment and growth. Before I go on to what he says, just a simple explanation what he's trying to say. Argentina is a very rich country. It's got it's a big country territorially, very fertile, very advanced, fairly advanced society, mostly European, educated, infrastructure is there. So what, if you go back to bartering, right? And if they went back to bartering, they would be exchanging value for value in Argentina. The problem with that is if you want to trade internationally, it's difficult. So all he's trying to say, Professor Werner, is that Argentina doesn't need to borrow dollars to create their local currency to get the economy going. All they need to do is to create the local currency, for productive purposes, and direct this credit to productive purposes to help the economy grow, and then naturally they'll be able to trade with other countries if they have, they produce goods, if they grow crops, it's not a problem. So the barter is what is important to understand. If there's no money in the world, Argentina would be fine because they've got everything there and they could barter things, right? So, and this is his argument here, and it's a very good one. He says, and I quote from this article, that money, so he's talking about the money that these countries like Argentina borrow from the IMF and from the international banks. And I quote here, that money is not in fact a scarce resource, but a tool that can and should be employed by governments as benefits communities and nations. Is also true for developing economies and emerging markets. The third world debt crisis was unnecessary since For most purposes, the affected countries did not need to borrow money from the foreign banks in order to grow their economies. Worse, the foreign money from their foreign currency denominated loans given to developing countries never ever reached the borrowing economy's borders. And this is the key part. He says this is because it is one of the rules in international banking that pound sterling bank money, and he's talking about the pound here in this instance, stays within the UK authorized banks. Euros stay in Eurozone economy banks, and US dollars remain with US banks. A so-called US dollar deposit in the UK is in actual fact a deposit with a US bank that is crediting the account of its UK correspondent bank with this amount. Thus, when a developing country borrowed from the international banks, they invariably lent dollars, pounds, euros, or other currencies of the industrialized countries, because the foreign bankers can only create foreign money, and they do create it out of nothing. The cruel joke on developing countries is now that those foreign dollars or euros that they borrowed will always stay abroad in their respective foreign banking systems. And it goes on. It says, it is of course possible to sell the foreign currency and purchase the domestic currency with it. But that only results in domestic bank credit creation, in this case Argentina, right? Something that can be undertaken without getting indebted to foreign bankers in foreign currency in the first place, while it is the borrowers who are made to shoulder the large foreign currency risk. Borrowers being Argentina and these emerging market countries. As the currencies of developing countries invariably fall over time against those of industrialized countries, they quickly get stuck in a foreign debt trap, unable to service or repay the foreign debt, which is spiraling out of control in domestic currency terms. This is when the foreign vultures move in and demand debt for equity swaps, handing other valuable domestic assets, land, mines, mineral resources, or mining rights from poor countries to rich foreign bankers who had in any case created money out of nothing. So you see that the president of Argentina now, Macri, he's welcomed these vultures back. He's paid them back. The developing country debt is in fact a form of predatory lending to ensure that the former colonies remain in economic terms in the hands of their masters, of their former masters, the bankers. If they have attractive assets, that is, most of all, the round trip via foreign banks is wholly unnecessary. If the borrowing nations want domestic currency, that is only created by their own banking system. So there you have it. Stupid is as stupid does, Argentina. They've been doing this since 1956. Argentina is becoming poorer and poorer. What's the solution? Well, the solution is not, it is clear, of course, don't deal with the IMF anymore. Don't deal with the US, the international bankers. The only problem with that, you know what happens when people piss off, and I'm going to use this language, piss off these people. Look what's happening to Iran. Look what's happened to Venezuela. And I'm not saying that, the Argentinian politicians of the last 60 years or Venezuelan politicians have done a great job, but I think they would be in a lot better shape if the IMF wasn't guiding them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, share it far and wide, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and you can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.